Time now to meet today's guest in Women of Today.
Margaret Minhinnick is a Yorkshire lass, married to a Welsh poet. They have an 8-year-old daughter and live in Porthcawl, South Wales, where she is the unpaid coordinator of the local office of Friends of the Earth. Now, green issues have rushed into the forefront of people's interest these days, and I'm wondering, it's become a religion with some people. Is it a religion with you?
No, it's not a religion, but it's a way of life. I think I probably spend more time at it than a religion, in fact, because occasionally when there's an issue that you've got to cover, you've got to go at it 24 hours a day. You can't sort of think, well, I'll do it next week, you know.
Yeah.
You've got to start a mean business and go ahead. So sometimes it's a very much 24-hour days, 7 days a week job.
Are you concerned about your daughter's future life on this planet?
Of course, and we all should be. When you think that children of today, or well, if I think of Lucy, she'll be experiencing environmental issues that are much more closer to her than they are to me when she's my age. She'll be much more intimately involved in the changes in society than we are. And so consequently, I feel the need as a parent, really, to pass on the knowledge that I've got to other people, so that they too can try and create the changes that we need, so that the future for our children is better than it possibly might do if we do nothing about it.
Women seem more concerned about environmental issues than men. Why is that?
Well, yeah, possibly they do. In my experience, it feels like that, but I can't say that, you know, I'm rigidly sure of it or anything. It's a dogma that women are. But many of the people that I meet that are involved in the Friends of the Earth groups up and down the country tend to be women, and I think they're probably a bit more intuitive.
More realistic too.
Yeah, more instinctively aware about what could happen. Think about it a bit more. You know, are more caring in a way, not sort of just pursuing the job situation in isolation, are more rounded, really.
Do male politicians understand green issues?
Not really. Most of them don't, anyway, I don't think. I think they can see that there's something to confront here, and rather like Margaret Thatcher, you know, they're ready to confront inflation and unemployment. But it's not as simple as that, it's much more complex. And so it's really changing your whole philosophical approach to politics and lifestyle. And they're not in any way showing me that they're prepared to do that.
No. Do the young people care more about things than the old?
I don't think they do, but because old people I meet in the street say, oh, you're doing a good job, you know, it's splendid that you're doing it. But in reality, it's the young people that come and do the things, but then of course they've got more energy.
It's in their interest, isn't it?
It's in their interest, and they've got more energy and more time, and they're ready for the changes.
When you were young, brought up in Yorkshire, did you concern yourself with these issues?
No, but I've thought about it, that perhaps why I feel concerned or something, or why I've got an awareness, maybe is because during my childhood I used to spend quite a bit of time in the countryside, which was quite close to home, only about 15 minutes walk, and I would be high up into the hills, and I felt sort of wind blown and free and wild, and it's sort of a memory that I can remember it and relate to it. And
you don't want it ruined.
That's right.
Now, is this going to be the definitive program on pollution? I want you to describe to me the various forms of pollution, how they happen, what damage has been done already, and what will happen if nothing is done. First of all, let's talk about acid rain.
Well, acid rain is caused by the combustion of fossil fuels, particularly coal and oil, burnt in the industrial processes of our factories, but particularly those of the Central Electricity Generating Board, of which we're all consumers. We consume their electricity, so we are, as all as individuals, polluting this planet with the emissions that cause acid rain. And we all drive cars as well, and it's the emissions that come out of the car exhaust that contribute to that acid cocktail. And we know that vast hectares of trees in Europe are showing severe signs of decline, and we know that many thousands of lakes in Europe too cannot support fish populations. In fact, where I work in Wales, we know from Welsh Water Authority research that at least 125 rivers cannot now support fish. Now, it doesn't mean to say that's all that can't support fish. They've done the work on 125. Maybe there are a lot more. I personally have been around areas of Holland and Germany with other Friends of the Earth people. We met foresters and environmentalists who showed us how to look for damaged trees, and they were adamant that the trees that we saw were damaged because of air pollution. And subsequently, I went with a few others in Friends of the Earth around Wales. We took a 500-mile trip around the tourist areas, really, of Wales. And we took a photographer with us, and we took photographs. And while we were taking them, we kind of realised, gosh, we better take some samples of a really good, healthy tree. And it was extremely difficult, really difficult to find one. And of the different species, it was not easy at all. And when we came back, we felt quite dismayed about the extent of the damage to the trees.
So we're going to lose trees, the lakes are going to be dead, and wildlife affected by these things will be lost. Next one, the greenhouse effect.
Yes, the greenhouse effect, also caused by the burning of the tropical rainforests. The gases, the carbon dioxide escapes from burning of the trees into the atmosphere, and we've already got the industrial processes in the west that we've described with acid rain, which are warming gases, plus the fact that we have intensive agricultural processes across the world that release methane. And then we have industrial processes again in the west, such as the chlorofluorocarbons releasing from aerosols, manufacture of those and the use of them, and the fast food industry, the packaging there, and the air conditioning units and building insulation. All these warming gases are working rather like a greenhouse around the Earth. They're trapping in the infrared rays and warming up the planet, and potentially that could be catastrophic. We're hearing about the scientists saying that the ice caps will melt, and that we'll have flooding in various areas in the world, which will affect food crop production and so on. And
I've got some figures here about flooding. With the increase in the sea level, there'll be 15 million people homeless in Britain, 15 million people homeless in Bangladesh, and 5 million homeless in Egypt.
Awful statistics.
Right. We've done that. That's just the second calamity. Now there's the hole in the ozone layer.
Yes, that's right. We know that there's a hole in the Antarctic, and now another one in the Arctic, and a smaller one has been sighted over Europe, where it's densely populated.
Really?
Yes, and that hole, let's say, and it's a kind of a protective gas around the Earth, the ozone, which protects us from the harmful ultraviolet rays, which could cause skin cancer and habitat change. And so it's extremely worrying that we're seeing it over Europe, where there's a predominant population.
Now let's go on to land pollution.
Yes, well, we've got all sorts of land pollution, but if we think about the way we get rid of our waste products into landfill sites, we make big holes in the ground and tip in all our refuse, which will mean that we won't have enough landfill sites before too long to carry on doing that. But meanwhile, we're finding out that there's all sorts of toxic leaching going on. There's a build-up of a methane gas that sometimes in some areas explodes and causes catastrophes where that happens. So we've got an urgent situation to start developing changes in our society there. For instance, we could go for recycling policies, which would mean that we're separating those waste products at source and using them again for secondary use, or even use after that again, such as bottle banks, can banks and paper banks. The sort of thing that we're trying to do in Porthcawl. Develop a project where the community bring their recyclable goods to a depot, and then they're sent off to a factory or a warehouse to be reused again, resalvaged and put into the production system again.
Well, land pollution is poisoning people, so I suppose water pollution is also doing the same. How is water pollution caused?
Yes. Well, we're finding that because of intensive agricultural processes in some areas in Britain, particularly East Anglia and the Midlands, that there is increased risk of receiving water that's been contaminated with nitrates or pesticides, levels that are above the standard regulated by the EEC, by the European Community. And I think there are about 4 million people who receive water supplies that are above those levels. And then we find that some areas, the people who are receiving water in old Victorian piping, and there's a lead pollution problem there. And we've known for years about lead and the retardation of the child's brain. And then now as well, there are increased levels of aluminium being found, about 1 million homes where that's being found. And that's because sometimes water authorities put it in as a flocculant to clarify the water, but also because of the acid rain inputs, it's leaching in certain areas, that chemical out of the soil into the water courses, and that's linked with premature senility, Alzheimer's disease.
Well, that's a pretty good resume of pollution. Now, you wrote to me in a letter that the incidence of leukemia in children in Porthcawl, where you live, is 2.5 times greater than the national average. Now, why is that? Is there a nuclear factory in here?
Well, it could be, because in the Severn Estuary there are 4 nuclear power stations, and possibly the pollution from those that's causing this
But they're 100 miles away, aren't they?
No. The channel is where, our coast is in that channel, in the Bristol Channel, and they're within 30 miles, 20 miles from us.
Tell me, how difficult is it to keep the green policies in your personal life?
Well, it is difficult because I'm living in a society that hasn't got a green philosophy. The only way I can recycle my paper, cans and bottles is to create a system myself. The community council, the local authority don't create one. There's only a few areas in Britain where that you can actually recycle. So I can't run my car on lead-free petrol because the pumps are 10 and 15 miles away. It's an old car as well, but I couldn't really do it very easily.
What can you do in your home?
Yeah, well, I've started buying products that are biodegradable. That means they don't pollute. They're also not tested on animals, so they're humanely made. And also we've got recycled paper products to buy from a shop that I created with help from other people as well. So I can, in a small way, start doing things. And of course I can decide to insulate my house, which we have done adequately, not to use more electricity than necessary. I've got a solar panel as well, and it's reduced the bills.
Now, you're not very rich. You are unpaid, and your husband is a poet, and I don't imagine poetry makes all that much money. How do you live?
Well, we're lucky. We've got a low mortgage, and we're very frugal. So Robert, of course, gets work to do with writing periodically, and we manage.
Does he support your views?
Oh yes, tremendously. He helps me. He does as much as me now. We kind of got roped in. And
does your family in Yorkshire support your views?
Yes, they're very intrigued by what I do. They're developing much more awareness and practically taking on some environmental issues themselves in a small way. But it's such a long way from where I live that it's a much slower process.
Why didn't you join Greenpeace or the Green Party instead of Friends of the Earth?
Well, the Green Party seems to me to only wait for elections when they kind of decide to hype up an issue or to do anything about it. And Greenpeace is very macho orientated. They kind of do big stunts, which are great. They get on television, they highlight the issue, and that's tremendous. But really and truly, you have to have action at the grassroots. Ordinary individuals have to decide to change for themselves the system, the society, for the better, because that is the only way it will change.
What can the individual do?
Well, first of all, they could just decide to reduce their own consumption patterns within their family. You know, think about draft-proofing, insulating, that kind of thing. Think about buying the safer products that don't pollute. They then could take it a step further and decide to say, well, I want recycling facilities in my community, I'll work towards that. Or I'll write the letter to the MP and say, I don't want any more acid rain or tropical rainforest destruction or nuclear power, whatever they think. You know, they've got to start taking part in democracy again, I feel. Not being passive or individualistic, becoming a bit more collective as well and bringing others together. You can't fight it, of course, on your own. You have to have support.
How did you join Friends of the Earth?
I was introduced to it by another woman about 8 years ago, and after being involved a little while, I started reading the literature more, listening to the radio, and I realised how serious the issues were. And then I gradually became more involved because what happened was a nature reserve warden got in touch with me and he said, you're in Friends of the Earth, in a local nature reserve warden, and he said, you should be helping us. We've got a campaign here that should be highlighted. You're a pressure group, come on. So I thought, oh, gosh, what's he talking about? And in fact, it was a countryside campaign that I've, of course, never been involved in before. There was the idea that on the nature reserve, the wildfowlers up there were wanting to take another quarter of the land. They already had half of it to wildfowl on, to shoot on. And so it seemed ridiculous that you have a nature reserve with 3/4 of it able to be shot on. So
Sure.
I had to start getting involved with the press and highlighting the issue, enlarging the story, because the only way to attract public attention is to use the press. And of course it was really fresh and new and very stressful to me, and had to do it just before Christmas.
Did you win?
Part of it. We reduced the amount of wildfowling down to 2 days a week and sunrise and sunset between September and February or something.
Have you had any other environmental victories?
Yes, we saved a sand dune system at the other side of Porthcawl called Merthyr Mawr from a prestigious golf course proposal, and it's a very unique area. It's second highest sand dune system in Europe and largest untouched one. So it was a very special area to protect. It's a site of special scientific interest. There's not much of the land designated as such, and so it's very important that anybody who knows about designated areas like that starts protecting them, because if we don't protect those, we can't protect the wider countryside. And so in that campaign, we rounded up a number of other organisations to be involved, such as the Council for Protection Rural Wales, who took on the common law rights, the naturalists who did the natural history investigation, the archaeological group who looked at the ancient monument status of the land, because it was an ancient monument as well, and a coastal group that were involved in natural history as well, and the civic trust in the town, who were very worried about access for people in the town and had a large membership. And between us, we all took on a different issue and highlighted it, but we did the overall profile. We were able to just go really steaming ahead with the emotional angle and the scientific facts with how wrong this was, and we won completely.
Coming down to everyday matters, you've opened a coffee bar. Do you only allow in sympathisers to your cause?
Oh no, everybody can come. I'd be glad if loads more came so we made more money. But yes, we get all sorts of people. I mean, like last week we had this chap come in and he said, I've got a greenhouse project to do. Have you got anything on the greenhouse effect? You know, or we get phone calls like, I've got moles digging up blue asbestos in my garden. What shall I do about it? Or even people from England saying, we want to come and live in Wales, but where would you recommend as being the best place to live that most the area most free from any sort of pollution whatsoever. You know, we're like an estate agent as well. And then of course we get the serious calls saying we've got a wild wood under threat close to us from some building construction firm. How do we go about stopping it? The bulldozers are coming tomorrow. So you have to kind of campaign over the telephone. You have to tell them what to do at one stage, and then they tend to ring back, and then you say, well, in that case, go there, there and there. You know, and then they develop the confidence and the awareness and the skills of where
What about
to
what
proceed.
complaints do you get? Do you get complaints from open cast miners or nuclear factory workers who regard Friends of the Earth as the enemy?
Well, I've been to a demonstration which was held in Neath. We went to one where the Select Committee on Welsh Affairs went to discuss open cast mining, and we went with our banners and we were confronted with a counter demonstration by the open cast workers, and on their banners it said, "We bread not grass," and Friends of the Earth, enemy of the worker. And it was quite threatening, these men there, you know, and it was very intimidating at first, but there was no confrontation. We said our point on the television and they said theirs, and in fact when we went for a drink afterwards they were quite civil and polite, and it wasn't as bad as I expected, but it is difficult in a situation where people feel they're going to lose their job.
There are, in this general cause of pollution, the causes are the use of energy, the current use of energy. What alternative uses of energy are there?
Yes, we have to develop a new strategy for providing energy for our communities now. Really and truly we should be going first of all for energy conservation, because at the moment we waste 65% just in the production and a great deal in transmission of our energy. So a huge policy insulating everywhere should be the first move, which will create a lot of jobs as well. And then we should be designing power stations that are smaller, closer to the source of energy, whether it be coal, gas, oil, refuse, biomass or whatever, smaller units that have the filtering technology that stop the acid rain, although we haven't got anything to stop carbon dioxide, but the reduction of energy would do that. And meanwhile, put money into research and development on wind, sun, tide, sea power, all those renewable energies, all that sustainable energy that's going to be free once you've paid for the equipment to be installed in the first place. You know, so a whole new strategy should be developed for the country.
Does the government put any research money into alternative sources of energy?
Peanuts, absolute peanuts. And they've cut down recently, very significantly, the Energy Efficiency Office in the government. The thing we should really be going for with the greenhouse effect. They've cut down the money towards that. Amazing.
Now, you're obviously a keen campaigner, Margaret. What does campaigning consist of, actually?
Well, it means you've got to be committed to the issue that you feel is going wrong. You've got to be sure that what you're saying is accurate. You've got to have the evidence and the facts to support yourself. You've got to be sure that nobody else is covering it. And then you've got to go ahead in a persistent, professional, consistent way. You can't sit back, as I said earlier. You must get on with it. You must be reactive to what's going on, but you also must be creative. You must stimulate interest in that issue to involve more and more people by possibly writing letters to MPs and getting it into the press, or to often I write to all the Welsh MPs about something, that usually gets in the press then. Or you might have to create a visual stunt that will attract TV, because the issue would not be receiving coverage without that kind of profile in the first place. So it all depends on the issue, but you have to work really hard and long and keep at it until you win.
In your town, are you regarded as a freak?
No, definitely not. People, when they do say anything, they're very complimentary. I think I'm just an ordinary person who's seen the light, if you like, and that there's room for a lot more people like me.
There certainly is. I've just joined the Friends of the Earth.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much for talking to me, Margaret.
Thanks very much.
That was the last programme in the present series. Next week at 2 o'clock, comedy with Mary Tyler Moore.